Welcome to another edition of the CommonSpace Show, just days after the global climate strikes. I'm David Jamieson.
And I'm Rhiannon Davies, and we're joined today by Erin Curtis, who is one of the organisers of the Scottish Youth Climate Strikes and who I met out on the protest in Glasgow on Friday.
So tell us, first of all, how you got involved in this movement. Have you been in part of the kind of going out every Friday striking?
Well, it's not a very particularly interesting story. I am really interested in marine conservation, and through that I learned about climate change on a general scale and how it'll impact not just our oceans but our society and our general natural world and human rights and all that blah blah blah. And so when I felt really passionately about it, and when the Youth Strike for Climate movement kind of started to make an appearance, you got Greta and everyone in Europe going out and starting the strikes, and one started up in Glasgow, I just kind of felt the need to get involved, so I went along, and before long I kind of got more heavily involved with the actual organisation and coordinating the strikes along with the group of people who kind of do that for our city, and that was just kind of how it came to be, really.
How big now is that kind of core network of activists that you're part of? Because from the outside looking in, it just looks like there's suddenly these huge demonstrations on the streets. So how many people are, and how intense is that organisation? Like, are you doing this like every week, every day?
It really depends on the event. So people put in however much time they can give. So there's about, maybe between 60 and 100 people who kind of organise in Glasgow, and those people contribute however much or however little they can, and kind of what their time dictates, and it kind of, obviously there's more demand for more work as big events come up. So like, we were all working our butts off when it came to September 20th and lead up to that, and other protests kind of monthly, the work starts to ramp up. But it really just depends on the time of the month, and what's going on in the kind of political sphere, and everything depends on how much work we do for any events that we're putting on or any publicising or things that we need to get out to the general public.
And so do you have regular meetings, or are you mostly talking through social media or new technologies, or how do you go about actually kind of arranging those things?
So it's kind of a mix of those. So in Glasgow we have, we communicate quite a lot online, and we do a large portion of it from our laptops and from our phones. I particularly, my office is my laptop. Like, it's not, I don't really have like a set space or anything. I just kind of work from wherever. But we do have monthly meetings just kind of to catch up and work together and really get some definitive planning down. And we do online meetings and stuff, but it's really beneficial to be there in person, because it feels like you can actually get some work done, and it adds that social aspect as well, because we all go and do nice things after. It's just it makes it a lot easier to plan when you have kind of monthly meetings and kind of catch-ups as well, that make it easier to work together.
And obviously Friday was the big one, and there's around 10 to 15,000 people at least in Glasgow. But you've been striking for a while, right? So you said you were striking every month?
Yeah, I strike every month since February, so a wee while now, although it doesn't, in terms of, it's not actually that long, but in terms of this movement it feels like it's been going forever, because it's very hardcore, and it feels like you're doing a lot of work in the lead up to that, which people don't really see, is there's a lot of work that goes into it in the background. So for 7 months, that kind of feels like I've been doing it for like 7 years, but in reality it's actually not been that long since I got involved, which is really funny, because it feels like we've been doing it for a lot longer now, because it's just so much work to do.
Do you feel really plugged into like the big global international movement? Obviously you've got Scotland local organisation, but do you really feel part of something that's all over the world?
Yeah, I think so. I think the really good thing about this movement is that we have the ability to organise regionally, nationally and internationally. Like, I definitely feel connected on all three of those levels, because there's the people in Glasgow that organise, the people in Scotland that I organise with, and the people in the rest of the world who we really feel connected to them, and like, we are part of this big global movement that's happening in countries all over the world, which is so important for that sense of identity. But one of the really great things about that is, so for example, this past Friday morning when we woke up. It was the day of the strike. We were all really, really nervous to make sure it would go well. And we woke up and we checked our phones, and I had a message from on our like group chat saying that people in Melbourne at their strike, I think it was Melbourne or somewhere in Australia, had 300,000 attendance, which was just because it was amazing, because that was when we knew that it was going to be a big turnout, and that was absolutely priceless. So it was really, you know, a good like feeling to be able to say that you're part of this big international thing that we are all doing together.
And do you know how many of the school children are striking regularly in Glasgow?
It kind of depends. Not everyone can, you know, attend all the strikes. So in Glasgow we don't have set weekly protests like we do in Edinburgh. We tend to focus on the monthly ones. We do get quite varied turnout. So our last strike was about 60 people. Because we didn't focus very much on the publicising of that one, because we were all putting our energy into September, where we got, you know, over 12,000, so it can be really, really varied. So there's not like one set number of one kind of set statistic, because people do as and when they can, which is really nice. 'Cause it's quite flexible.
And so what do you normally do on those days? Are you out protesting, or are you doing other learning, or how do you spend that time?
Like on the Fridays that we have protests, so on those days we go out and we set up in George Square. Sometimes we'll have stalls, sometimes it'll just be, you know, our speakers, and we'll bring chalk a lot of the time. So if you pass George Square and there's tons of climatey drawings, you know, we've been there. So we just kind of go out and we all get together and gather in the square, and we start at about 11 o'clock, and we all just we do most of the preparation in beforehand, and at our meetings and things and online the night before. So most of it's done by the time that we get there. Most of getting the word out has, you know, we've really focused on that in the lead up to it, which is why there's more work to be done, obviously. And we just kind of go out and we just kind of get started, and people tend to show up at around, we normally arrive a wee bit before, and people start to show up as the day goes on, and you know, we start the strike and do all our stuff like the Kayleys and things.
And what's been the reaction from your parents or your school?
So my parents, I feel like this is the time that I can rectify what I've accidentally wronged my parents, because the other day on the BBC live on radio, I told them that my parents were standard people, meaning it in a nice way, and that they don't tell me what to think or say or anything, but it came out very, very wrong. So whilst my parents never force me to think or do or say anything, you know, they are incredibly supportive, and they really are, you know, quite wonderful in that they allow me to go off and do my own thing and, you know, do what I want to do, but they offer me the support, and I always know that that's there if I ever need any help with, you know, like getting about places or that kind of thing, which is really, really useful and definitely not standard. So thank you very much, Mum and Dad.
But there has been some backlash. I mean, I suppose, though, it's the sign of a successful movement, you know, when there's a backlash from people who have power or authority or whatever. I've brought together a few wee headlines here. This first one's from Dinesh D'Souza, who is an American kind of right-wing pundit, who says that children, notably Nordic white girls with braids, were often used in Nazi propaganda, like Greta Thunberg. So there's a claim with some substance. What do you make of that? What do you make of the targeting of Greta as an individual?
I think that's a real shame. I think, first of all, I mean, I think it's fairly evident, considering Greta was so heavily criticised by those same people for wearing, you know, an anti-fascist t-shirt, that she is nowhere like a Nazi. But I think it's a real shame, because in terms of her, and personally, the fact that they recently have started to come and really put the focus on her instead of the movement, I think that's a real shame, because this movement is much bigger than one individual. You know, it's building on all our work as kind of like a united force, and all the work that's been done by campaigners and people before us, and it building on all of that, and it's really not just about her, as she's always saying, you know. And I think it's a real shame that they have had, you know, they feel like they are losing discussion, and they feel like people are starting to pay attention to what we're saying, so they feel like they have to target an individual, which I think is a real shame for her, because that's not, it's not right, obviously, but also more so than that, I mean, she doesn't like the spotlight being on her, as she's stated, and I think it's a real shame that, you know, as part of that, people have started to attack her in a personal capacity, because I mean, that's not, she doesn't want to be doing this anyway, like, it's and also it's just horrible to go about being nasty to people, you know, be nice.
But how much do you think, I mean, I spoke to a few young girls on Friday who told me that she was a big inspiration for them. Are you inspired by Greta Thunberg?
Yes, I am. I've heard I've heard a lot about her. She did that big protest thing and she went into Parliament, and I'm really inspired by her and how she got on the boat and like travelled all the way to America.
Is she as a personality inspiring in some ways and kind of a role model for you? Or
I think she's inspiring for all of us. I mean, she's great. Although I think there are a lot of people who have maybe predecessed her as well, who are equally as inspiring, who might not have been heard. So there's been a lot of things, for example, in the past few days, of people have been showing the pictures of Friday and then Greta sitting alone just over a year ago by herself. And people have kind of been saying, oh, look how amazing and wonderful it is that this one person has done this all by themselves. And quite a lot of people have been saying, you know, that's great and Greta's amazing, but we can't, you know, ignore the efforts that have been put in the past by, you know, Indigenous people in the Global South and people who have not been listened to and, you know, have not been acknowledged in the same way that Greta has, because she lives in a Western country and is white. And I think that our movement really needs to focus on ensuring that we don't, you know, just put all the attention on this one this one individual who, you know, is been lucky enough to be able to have their voice heard. And don't get me wrong, that's not a criticism of Greta at all, because I think she's an absolute legend. I just think that we can't put it all on her, because A, that's not what she's asking us to do, and B, you know, it's not just her efforts. There's a lot of people who've been doing this for years before her, and really the momentum has been building over a number of decades, which I think is really important to recognise.
Here's a trio of right-wing British newspaper headlines. The Telegraph, this is a Telegraph editorial. This climate strike is a joke. Childish socialism won't help the environment. The next one is from the Express, which just says, get back to school. And number three, the climate strike kids aren't the issue, but the sinister doomsday cult that uses them are. Who are the sinister doomsday cult behind the climate strike?
Well, I've got news for you. The sinister doomsday cult. They're not real. What? Like, what even is that? I can't, you know, there's no real way to even respond to that other than to say it is total rubbish. There is no one, you know, this whole idea that the school strike movement is some sort of conspiracy and ooh yeah, amazing, we're all being controlled, and that's just a way to write off our movement because, as I say, they know that we're getting the attention, we're getting recognition.
It's fascinating that those are really thin criticisms.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a measure, isn't it, of how much the, you know, scientific evidence falls on your side of the debate. What could they say about the climate?
Yeah.
What about the childish socialism? Like, do you think that this is a movement for kind of a wider social transformation? Do you think this stops at the environment? No.
One thing that I really, really do believe in, I find myself saying this all the time, but it's because it's so true, is that climate justice and social justice are inherently linked, you know, and climate change ultimately will affect every aspect of our society. It's not just nature, and it's not just, you know, the rise in sea levels and the poor polar bears. It's also, you know, human rights and poverty and the economy and all sorts of issues that's going to affect all areas of our society. And I think in order to combat climate change, you also have to combat those social issues and, you know, those difficulties and those barriers that really play into this whole kind of ball and tangled kind of big mess, if you will. If you have to tackle one thing to tackle the other, because there is no climate justice without social justice, you know, and that ultimately is going to, spearhead this, I think, you know, in the end it's going to end up, I think, turning into, you know, a big revolution of not just our environmental policies, but how our society works and how we behave and how we treat each other and all that fun stuff. And I think, you know, we need to really look at that. We really need to look at those aspects of the issue in order to combat the environmental one.
And then what about that statement which gets bandied around a lot? It's like, well, you should be in school. Why are you missing your classes for this? I mean, what makes this more important for you than going to school? I
don't think it is more important than going to school for me. I am really passionate about doing well in school. I feel it's important for me personally. I feel it's important, you know, to do well in school, so that I can ultimately go on and get a good job or whatever. But I think that this is such an immediate issue, and this is the only way that we have found, the power to bring attention to that immediate issue, because it needs addressing right now, that we just have to. Because if we don't, so say for example, a lot of people have suggested, why don't you go out and strike on Saturdays? Nobody's going to listen to a bunch of teenagers and young people going out on a Saturday and saying, oh, yeah, climate change. We have to have a way to make that impact that is going to get people to listen and is going to get people to look and go, oh, where are all the kids? Why aren't they in school? And it's really it attracts attention, because that ultimately is what we need, because we have to start paying attention to this issue to actually fix it, because it can't, just fly under the radar anymore. We have to find a way to go and really just be like, this is what's happening, this is what we need to do, listen to us, or we will or we'll keep missing school. Because
and now we wanted to show some of the other interviews that I did on Friday. So here's the reasons that other school children and young people gave me for being out on strike.
What do we want? What do we want? Climate justice! No!
Hi, my name is Ashanti and I'm 16 and I go to Kelvinside Academy. I feel like so far response from the government and politicians in general has been, we'll add it onto our list of problems so we can seem like we're for the cause, but we won't make it our main priority. And I feel like there has to come a point where you decide that yes, your climate emergency is actually an emergency, and stop trying to beat around the bush and trying to people please and actually get stuff done.
They've declared a climate emergency, but they're not legally obligated to take any action, and it's just ridiculous. The whole world is about to kind of collapse in front of us, and no one seems to be doing anything.
No more coal! No more oil! Keep our carbon in the soil!
I'm Kayla Megan Burns, and I'm the Vice President of Community at Strathclyde Student Union.
And tell me about the Divest Strathclyde campaign.
Well, right now Strathclyde is over 3.8 million invested in fossil fuels. We're currently in a bit of an argument to try and get them to divest from fossil fuels. So Strathclyde has come out in hordes today.
What do we want? Climate justice! What do we want? Now!
I'm Mila French, I'm 11 and I go to Balfour High School. We're trying to ban fossil fuels because it's really bad for the environment, and a lot of people don't believe in climate change, and we need to cut back on stuff we eat and stuff we do nowadays, because so we need to change it now.
My name is Shreya Sol. I'm 10 years old and I go to Glasgow Gaelic School. We're wanting to change it, and we think that
we can help.
Yeah, and this march is more important than 1 day of school, and that's why we're striking, because we want to help the planet.
Yeah. Why are you out today?
Because the Earth's going to shit.
And what do you hope to achieve?
More people understand what's actually happening.
And how old are you?
15. Today.
Climate justice!
My name's Caitlin Ashcroft, I'm 13 and I go to Jordan Hill School.
My name's Heather Kelly, I'm 13 and I also go to Jordan Hill School.
Well, I'd just like to say that we want you to help look at all the people out here all wanting the same thing. So just take a look at this, and why can't you lead us in the direction we all want to go?
To start focusing on climate change rather than Brexit, because in the end this is what's really going to matter. This affects the whole world. If you put it into perspective, Brexit doesn't matter at all.
My name is Erin Curtis and I'm a climate activist from Glasgow. I first started striking in February, but I got involved with the organising of the strikes in April. There's definitely thousands and thousands of people here, which is really, really exciting because it shows just how much society cares about this issue and the fact that it's at the forefront of people's priorities and what we are trying to demonstrate to the government. So following this strike, we were calling on the government to take real drastic action on climate change. Some actions that we would like to see are, we would really like to see them introduce a Green New Deal. So what the Green New Deal is it's basically the concept of restructuring our infrastructure and kind of reshaping how our society works and transitioning, or what we call a just transition, from unsustainable industries and a reliance on things that are going to damage our environment and ultimately our futures, and a transition into things like renewables and sustainable industries that we can focus on, and making sure that nobody gets left behind in that.
The Green New Deal is a solution to the climate emergency that isn't about sacrifice, it's about economic transformation, it's about an opportunity not just to solve the climate breakdown, but to lift hundreds of thousands of people out of poverty. This is literally the last moment in human history that we've got to save the world from the catastrophe that we've brought about. And the young people across the world who've started this movement are shaming the governments and the corporations who haven't just failed to stop the crisis, who've been the ones actively causing it.
If there was one thing that I would want people to take away from today, is that this is not the end of our action. This is very much the beginning of our green revolution, if you will. We are going to continue marching, we're going to continue striking, and we're going to continue to demand action for our planet until the government does what's necessary.
Okay, so Erin, what comes next for the movement? You said there that you're not going home after this. The movement continues, and how much resistance do you expect from politicians and big business and stuff like that? Because this movement's a year old, and the argument is still more or less, the fundamental argument that something must be done. How does the movement escalate if resistance continues?
I think that's a tricky question, because it very much feels like some people have seen it as we got 15,000 people or more or less in Glasgow on Friday, and it's kind of like, where do we go from there? But there is a lot that needs to be done. I think our plan for the future is to keep striking and keeping the pressure on, and showing that this is something that we really care about, and hopefully we'll be able to ramp it up a bit. I'm not sure how that'll happen or what that might look like, but we really, our plan is basically just to keep going and keep pushing on and getting stronger and stronger as we progress. So, for example, the UN's climate conference, COP26, is being hosted by Glasgow in 2020, which we're all looking forward to. And we're not looking forward to because we're not, as you say, they're going to offer a fair bit of resistance because they're politicians and big business and there's all that. But we are looking forward to having that opportunity to get youth voices, and not just youth voices, but the voices of the people really at the forefront of that and showing what people care about. So that'll be at the end of next year, and there's already, we're already starting to talk about our plans for that, even though yesterday's not barely 3 days old, but we're workaholics, we like to plan, so hopefully that'll be really interesting, and we'll hopefully have a few more big strikes next year as well as our monthly ones, and we can really hope, really ideally get some fairly momentous stuff in there, which is really good for the climate movement and life on Earth.
That's a really big set piece battle, isn't it?
Yeah.
In Glasgow, that's a really good thing to be working towards.
Yeah.
And so the climate change bills have been going through the Scottish Parliament this week, but it's getting criticised by some, the Scottish Greens included, for not going far enough with its targets, or the fact that it's just setting targets and not taking actions. Yep. Is there actions that you'd like the Scottish Government to be doing, or politicians to be doing, and making those changes? I mean,
I was talking about this a wee bit on Friday, but in terms of our demands, there are a bunch of things we would like to see, but one of those that, you know, certainly in an individual capacity, and also SYCS are just discussing this now, is a Green New Deal. We would really like to see the government adopt that, and the premise of a Green New Deal is, you know, what I mentioned earlier about social justice and climate justice being intrinsically linked, and it's the concept of moving away our dependency from unrenewable industries to sustainable ones, and making sure that nobody's left behind in that, and that we're not just, you know, putting people out of a job, and that we're retraining people and lifting them out of poverty and putting them into, you know, kind of sustainable renewable industries to create a green economy, and quite a circular economy as well, where the focus isn't just on consumption, it's on, you know, reduce, reuse, recycle, but more complex than that, and actually making sure that you know, our society isn't just relying on, you know, things that are going to benefit the environment, but instead not benefit the environment, but instead we are really thinking about the long-term impacts of everything that we use and everything that we consume and everything that we, you know, rely on to make our system work, and ensuring that we are taking into account its environmental impacts and its social impacts as well for people, not just here but across the globe, and how it's going to affect people's livelihoods, and just taking all that into account instead of, oh, that's a shiny thing, let's go, you know, produce that because people will buy it, and really taking the focus away from let's just kind of swamp the consumers with all these soulless stuff that is going to be bad for our environment but is, you know, going to make us money, and instead let's think about, all right, well, is this going to last a long time? Are people going to be using this? Is this going to be created in a fair way for people and a sustainable way for the environment? You know, it's just kind of about recentering that shift of everything we do, so from our infrastructure to everything that we buy and sell and all the goods we trade and our economy, and making sure that our economy is relying on industries and materials and goods that aren't finite and aren't unsustainable, and, you know, are going to be traded in a fair way. And that's kind of, you know, the general idea of a Green New Deal, is making sure that that is at the forefront of what we do. And you know, a Green New Deal isn't just one thing, it's a lot of different things, because this affects a lot of different aspects of society.
Obviously in Scotland there's a particular thing as well over North Sea oil, and how that's been so important for parts of the economy for decades, and there's constantly this tension, isn't there, in Scottish politics between like declaring a climate emergency but then talking about how much more oil we're going to take out of the ground and how many jobs that creates. How do you think we convince people, you know, because there are a lot of workers in Scotland who depend on fossil fuel industries.
Totally.
How do we win that argument with them about, I mean, what do they have to be given to make that just transition, you know what I mean?
I think, you know, two things. I think, first of all, I think, you know, people are rightly worried because this isn't just the climate, this is their livelihoods. That is, you know, it's not just about oil for the rich, this is people's lives and people's jobs that people, you know, are worried are under threat. But I really think that we need to make it clear that climate activists, we aren't after your, you know, your way of life. You know, we don't want to, you know, leave people behind. That's one of the really important bits of a Green New Deal, is making sure that nobody's just left without a job and just put out of, you know, cast out and left with nothing. It's really, we really think it's important to ensure that people are retrained and, you know, put into these sustainable industries, which is necessary for our future. We really think that the government needs to offer some sort of, you know, help to people, maybe, I don't know, financially or also in terms of their skill sets, to make sure that they can make that transition and make sure that it works for them, instead of people just being like, oh, so you're an oil worker, well, guess not, guess what, you blow this wee windmill now and making sure it turns around and gives us some energy. You know, we want people to feel like they're doing meaningful, sustainable jobs, and we need the government to ensure that people can feel like that and, you know, that they actually are. But also I think that Scotland as a country, you know, we have huge potential in renewable industries. So, you know, we've got a lot of potential for like wind, sea, you know, all that fun stuff. And I think it's, you know, it's very, very promising that we can, you know, pave the way in this, and we can really be leaders at the forefront of renewable and sustainable industries. And I think that's going to be really beneficial to our country's economy, is to be leading in those kind of industries. And, you know, because we have a lot of potential to do some really great stuff in developing those kind of sectors. You know, we paved the way really in terms of pioneering new renewable industries, and new renewable ways of creating energy and creating resources and extracting resources. But sorry, not extracting resources, that made no sense. But you know, we really pioneered that, and I think Scotland has the capability and the potential to really be at the front of that, and I think it's a really promising venture for our country, to be able to, you know, really shift our focus and put our effort into sustainable industries.
So looking ahead then, so if you're 15 now, if you know you decide to go to university, college and then university, and then maybe in 6 years, 7 years, you're entering the world of work. How different do you think that could look if these things have been put into place? How different might people's lives look if people have taken the kind of the route that you're hoping that they take?
Hard question. Well, I hope that further down the line, jobs are going to be fairer. We're going to put, you know, an emphasis on the industries and the jobs and the sectors that are really important to making sure that our society works in that kind of equitable and fair green way. So I hope that there's going to be a lot more focus on, you know, as I've said, quite a lot, renewables and sustainable industries, and a lot more focus on making sure that jobs that are, you know, really work well for society and contribute positively to the kind of status quo are going to have a real emphasis on them. I feel like the environmental sector is going to grow a lot in the upcoming years, obviously as we look for solutions to the climate crisis as much as can be possible, and also as we best try and protect ourselves from the inevitable causes of climate change, or the inevitable results of climate change rather, and the inevitable impacts that we are going to face over the years with these more, you know, extreme weather events and natural occurrences, and the impacts we're going to feel on our economy, you know, as it's trickier to grow crops, and it's going to, you know, the prices of food are going to rise up, and in that ideal world, I hopefully think that there's going to be a lot more support for the people at the, you know, maybe at the bottom, who are going to be the most impacted by those results of climate change that kind of are inevitable at the moment, because we have already, you know, seen a fair amount of warning, and we can't mitigate that. That is just, we have to accept that, and we're going to have to deal with that. So hopefully there's going to be the help and the support in place for the people who are going to be worst hit by that. That I think that's really important, you know, that whole idea of no one left behind in terms of jobs or in terms of just kind of general society, because the people, you know, the poorest people in our society are really the ones who have contributed the least to this issue, but more so are going to feel the effects the most, because they're going to be the ones who can't afford to adapt, and we really need to be able to support them and make sure that they are best able to provide for themselves. And
and then what happens if these changes don't come into being? I mean, what happens for your movement? What will your next steps be if things don't change and we keep progressing towards that 2030 target without things getting any better for those people?
I don't know what we will really do. We just have to, you know, hope that something can be done, because if it's not, it's going to really, really impact all of us really, really like heavily. But, you know, as I say, it will disproportionately affect the people at the bottom of society, and we have to ensure that that doesn't happen, because that is, you know, it is so morally unjust, and it's not just morally unjust, it's, you know, unjust on so many levels. It's not right, and I really, really hope that the government are able to take action, and when I say are able to, that they do take action because they are able to, because if they don't, it is going to not be great for society. So I really, I am optimistic, but it's tricky not to be quite scared that there will be a negative outcome for the future, which is really quite concerning, which is why we put so much work in trying to get them to act now, because we have to, otherwise we are going to feel those negative impacts much more than we would if we were to start implementing fun stuff like a Green New Deal.
Great. Well, I think that's probably all we've got time for. So thanks so much, Erin, for coming in. It was very inspiring to see you and all of your kind of cohort out on the streets on Friday, and good luck with it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Keep fighting.